where your host, nationally recognized certified appraiser Elizabeth Stewart, Santa Barbara's treasure sleuth, will help you put a value on the treasures in your own home.
Every time it rains, it rains.
All right, here we go.
Pennies from heaven. Don't you know each cloud contains pennies from heaven?
So let's find out.
2,
How valuable
1,
is it?
You're live.
Hello, 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 Santa Barbara. It's your Chantress of everything valuable and beautiful, Elizabeth Stewart. And I have two old friends that are joining me today because we've actually talked before. I've had on the show, gosh, this was probably 5-6 years ago, Brett, when you were doing, I think, a prison expose. Anyway, Brett Lee Dix is here and Patricia Houghton Clark, and we're celebrating the fact that they've got a show that's so interesting to me. And I thought, oh God, this is really, I've got to cover this. It's at the Architectural Foundation Gallery. The name of the show is called Fair Trade, F-A-R-E, as in something you eat, fair trade. And what it is Patricia has gone ahead and done local, Santa Barbara, for example, fast food places, and shot them in really interesting ways. And Brett has done the same thing in Western Australia, done the fast food places in Western Australia. So what we have is we have these two artists coming together, and our opening reception has already, well, it's tonight, isn't it? The opening reception, yeah? Yep. So it's at the Architectural Foundation. Brett and Patricia will give an artist talk on Saturday, March 29th at 2 p.m. And this is kind of an interesting thing. In our climate today, 10% of all the art sales will be donated to the Immigrant Legal Defense Fund. What a cool thing. So let me talk to Brett first. Brett, who was behind this? Who was the brainchild behind this show?
That's an interesting question because really the origins of this happened by accident. I'd moved down to Australia at the end of 2019, and I hadn't lived there for, I don't know, 30 years or something. And I'd never lived in Western Australia. My wife got a scholarship to do a PhD down there, so we just packed up and went down there for that opportunity. And so I was a real fish out of water. I'd never lived in Perth before, never lived in Western Australia, and just decided to start exploring the city. Every Saturday morning, my son and I would jump in the car and we'd drive around and photograph Perth. And I'm always drawn to sort of the symmetrical and stark places like industrial areas. So we started exploring these industrial areas, and I saw these things called lunch bars. And I didn't know what a lunch bar was, and I spoke to Natalie, my wife, about it, and she said they're these fast food eateries that are usually found in commercial zones, industrial areas that feed the working class. And her parents used to run one not far from where we're currently living. And so I just became obsessed with them because they were just so quirky and so bright and colorful, and they're all different. You know, fast foods become so commercialized with McDonald's and various corporate entities, but these each one has a different personality, and I was really drawn to that. So I just started photographing them and thought nothing of it. And then when COVID hit, you know, we were all stuck in Perth, so I just photographed more and more and ended up photographing about 100 of them, and just put it up on my website. And I've been working on this other series for years, and I started pitching that other series. And coming out of COVID, everybody didn't want to look at depressing landscape photographs that have been annihilated by nuclear energy. So a curator said, I looked at your website and saw these lunch bars. That would be a perfect exhibition. And I thought, really? And they said, yeah, absolutely. And they curated it and put it on, and it was a huge success. And other regional galleries jumped on it. So it's had 5 showings. And then I came up with this wacky idea that I'd love to do it here, but it needed a local context, and I couldn't think of anyone better than Patty to provide that local context. She's one of my favorite photographers. We're good friends. We work well together. We've worked in the past, and yeah, she jumped on board, which I'm will be eternally grateful for.
All right, we cannot hear Elizabeth. So we're working on those technical issues here. I'm Richard Dugan sitting in for Elizabeth, and you are not coming through.
Oh, how is
there
that,
you go. There
Richard?
you go. Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Go right
Okay.
ahead.
I think the fact that we've got two separate computers here. Okay, so Patricia, can you tell me how you found the places that you shot and if you had any food when you did?
Well, first off, I did not have any food. And secondly, I decided to do the taquerias of Central California. And so I started in Salinas and came as far south as Ojai. And so there's just a mix of different places between here and Salinas. And, you know, you just kind of drive into town and look around, and it's tricky to try and arrive at the same time that the lighting is going to be good for the image. And so, yeah, so there's a collection of different taquerias between Carpinteria and Ojai, Santa Barbara, Goleta, and then on our way up north. And but I was really touched that Brett asked me to partner with him on this project, and we've been working on it together now for a couple of years, and just really an interesting kind of entree, no pun intended, for right now, given the current political climate. So we're really happy to have this kind of beautiful pairing of celebrating imagery of places where people can go and be safe and eat good food. You know, it's the
So
promise.
I have to say that Patricia is five generations here, or five. Is it five? Five something. What is it, Patricia? You've been here for.
No, the thing is, I'm fifth daughter out of 8. That might be what you're thinking.
Okay, okay. And I also go ahead.
Started when I was in high school. So actually, my kids are first generation Santa Barbarans.
Okay. So you have been in our community for quite a while, and I have to say that your background, you are an award-winning photographer and have a great interest in culture and history and human nature, featured in exhibitions, publications, the United States and Europe. Photographs of the 2007 Obama presidential campaign and election night in Grant Park are in the Barack Obama Presidential Library collection. And I have to say, downloaded 4 or 5 pages of exhibitions, shows, all kinds of connections that you've made, books that you've had published, correspondences, photography and poetry collaboration in 2022, Facing Ourselves, Reckoning 2021, A Villa in California 2010, Photography and Architecture, Sentimento, Images of Italy, Waiter, There's a Worm in My Orange Juice in 1995. And of course, you're also, have you made a donation of your work to the Santa Barbara Special Research Collection? I see that it was in process.
It's a special collection at the University of Chicago. And
I see.
I worked on that, creating that archive for them for about a year. And so it's called the Hannah Holborn Special Collections. And it's housed at the University of Chicago. And what we're going to be working on now is getting ready for an exhibition of the election night photographs that I took in Grant Park in 2008. And we're going to show these photographs on the 20th anniversary of Obama's election in Chicago.
Oh, that is fantastic. Fantastic. And then Brett, American Australian photographer. And I think, Brett, we spoke last when you were talking about a devastated landscape that kind of rang a bell. When did we speak last? What were you up to then?
I think when we last spoke, it was with regards to the prisons. I did a series looking at abandoned prisons across the
That's right.
US and Australia. So I think it was pertaining to that particular series.
That's right. That's exactly right. And you are here in Santa Barbara, but you also have a place in Fremantle. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So tell me what kind of food and what kind of ethnic um, elements do we find in your lunch bars, Brett?
Well, living in Fremantle, Fremantle's the port city on the west coast of Australia. So it's where all the immigrants came in, and um, the mining boom brought a lot of people in, but a lot of people stayed in Perth. And then over the years, as industrialization happened, these little eateries started popping up everywhere, and they're sort of like diners here, but they're more takeout. It's a takeout version of a diner. They open early, so they open at 5 a.m. They close round about 2 p.m. or 2:30. So they're just breakfast and lunch, and they're geared towards blue collar workers. So it's where people, put down tools at lunchtime and duck down to the lunch bar to grab their lunch. But when they started springing up, it was the immigrants that came to Western Australia that opened them up. So like I mentioned, the Italians, um, a lot of them were opened up by Italian influences. So there was that sort of immigrants. So there was that sort of influence to the food. Greeks were another cohort that embraced them, and my wife's family's Croatian, and yeah, her parents bought a lunch bar and it had a Croatian flair. But since, over time, just like it has here, the demographics of immigrants have changed, and there's been a lot more immigration from Southeast Asia and from the subcontinent, and so that rings true in the lunch bars and what's being served there. So it's really diverse, and people are drawn to specific lunch bars because of what's served there. There's some Vietnamese ones that are just insanely good. They're better than some of the restaurants you'll go to around the place. And lunchtime, there's lines out the door, and there's a few tables out the front, but a lot of people take it back to work. But we go down there and wait and wait and wait and score one of the few tables, and then join the line, and an hour later we walk out with our food. But the food is just impeccable, and I think that's the beauty of it. It's cheap, it's meant to be fast, but the popularity of some of them defeats that. But yeah, people have just embraced them.
So the Vietnamese restaurant you're talking about, what was the name of that place?
It is the Bibra Lake Lunch Bar. And looking at the building or looking at the name, you wouldn't think that it was this little hive of Vietnamese culture, but you walk in, and they do amazing soups and amazing rolls, and it's just insanely good.
So, okay, now I want to have an explanation of this too, Brett. This exhibition is presented by the Architectural Foundation. Obviously, we know that's the opening tonight, but also Western Australian Government's Department of Local Sport, Culture, and Cultural Industries, and Facing Ourselves, with 10% of all art sales being donated to the Immigrant Legal Defense Fund. So, how did this connection happen, Brett?
Well, I'll talk about the Western Australian government, and
Yeah.
then chime in about Facing Ourselves. We're really fortunate in Australia that both federally, on a state level, and even on the city or county level, there's tremendous support for the arts. There's funding, there's grants. Um, Both myself and my wife have been recipients of grants in the past. And when this opportunity presented itself, given that the photographs were made in Western Australia, I reached out, and there's a category of grants where when an opportunity falls on your lap, there's a pool of money that's available to grab that opportunity and run with it. So when this exhibition was offered to us and we got the contracts, I applied for a grant and very fortunately received it, and it paid for me to bring the work over here and come over for the opening and to give a talk. So, thank you to the Western Australian government, because Art's really important right now. We're going through these incredible times where the socio-political climate is turned on its head, and now's the time for artists to create arts that make statements and get messages out there, and for the Western Australian government to support that through this initiative and through the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries is just incredible.
So I have to say, I love the piece in the Independent on the show on fair trade. And the first quote in that article is, "This is the perfect time to create art," right? With the current sociopolitical climate, you couldn't be anywhere better to create meaningful work. And that's a quote from Brett Lee Dix, in collaboration, of course, with the show Fair Trade with Patricia Houghton Clark. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what was the criteria for finding these places? Did you have like, okay, we're going to have cultural boundaries to our selection, or we're going to have a certain size or a certain climate, et cetera, a certain, how did you sort of hone in on the groups of eating places that you wanted to shoot? I want to address that a question first to Patricia, please.
Well, Elizabeth, Brett really set the stage for the style, the new topographical style of the imagery. And that was a great challenge for me because I haven't really focused my work on that particular style. So I saw some of his work and kind of ingested it and tried to approach it in a similar manner so that we would create that connection even more strongly in the images. And so it's basically, finding the right light and trying to find a spot where you can photograph in a very kind of frank and facing yourself sort of way to photograph the exteriors of these eateries. And the only one that I photographed that is not a permanent location is on Milpa Street. And I just happened to catch it out of the corner of my eye when I was leaving Santa Barbara one day, and turned around and parked the car and photographed a very sweet little taco caravan that is parked there. And in fact, we have invited them to bring that caravan to the opening tonight. So they will be serving their fair trade tonight at the opening. And it's really, really cool to be supporting them and have this very authentic food, which will kind of create that other level of understanding about what we're trying to do.
And I'll just jump in on the end of that. The thing that Patty had seen my photographs, and then she went off and did her thing. And what struck me when the photographs started coming in was just how she viewed it. Her vision was or perception was a little different from mine, but it was the same sort of general style. But you could see her personality in the work, and I just love that. The photographs are very elegant. There's a little bit of whimsy to them. They're colorful, and I could just see Patty in those photographs. It was really magical. I just love the experience of her sending through her photographs.
And Richard, we have to go to quick break, but when we get back from the break, I want to talk about this facing ourselves. Brett, you promised you'd tell us a little bit about what facing ourselves actually is, and how you thought of the Legal Defense Fund as a benefactory when we get back from the break. Richard, let's take a quick break.
Solo eso ha quedado de un vaquero.
Social Security is with you through life's journey.
All right, you're clear. The one thing that has struck me about all of this is the level of frustration of those people who came through the normal way, And it just dawned on me, yeah, well, we can change the rules. Maybe we make it a little easier for people to enter this country. We've done that that's what the amendments of the Constitution are about, and so on and so forth. So if we could maybe make it a little easier, because the folks coming from other countries, God, the contributions they make to our society are just unbelievably incredible. I'd hate to lose that, you know?
Well said.
So that's what really bothers me about that one. What's going on here? That one immigration bill that got axed because, this is my reference, because the Orange Jesus said, axe it. And so they bowed and axed it. And yet it's like we had immigration reform right in the palm of our hands. And
Bipartisan.
yeah, and it was bipartisan. Of course, it would never pass, right now, but you never know. Maybe in 2 years, we'll see. All right, stand by.
Ya con esta son 3 meses. Se ha visto lo bonito.
I like this stuff. This is great.
La primera fue en
All right,
Macale.
Elizabeth, here we go. 3, 2, 1, you're live.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart. I have great pleasure of talking with Brett Lee Dix and Patricia Houghton Clark. And we're talking about the show that's opening up at the Architectural Foundation Gallery, Fair Trade. It's called FARE, Fair Trade. And why it's fair is because it deals with lunch bars in Western Australia. That's Brett. And taquerias here in Central California, and that's Patricia. They got together, and how they hung the show is in pairs. So I want to know more about that. But Brett, before we talk about that, I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about facing ourselves.
Yeah, well, that's Patty's initiative, so she's probably the best person to talk about that. And she's the
Okay.
one who forged the connection with the Defense Center as well, which was just a stroke of genius. So yeah, I'll throw it over to Patty.
Okay, I'll catch it. So thanks for asking about that, Elizabeth. Facing Ourselves is a project that I started in 2016. I had done an artist residency in a very small village in southern Italy in 2011. And in the interim, after I left there, the refugee crisis started hitting Europe really hardcore, especially the southern coast of Italy. And so I decided to fly back and see how this influx of migrants was affecting these small villages in the South. And that started a portrait project that I call Facing Ourselves, which was really fascinating to do. And they were very, very generous with their time. And I did portraits of locals and of people who had migrated into the area. And then we did large scale street exhibitions of the work. And it was really talking about how we all, we're all one basically, and that everyone has migrated around the planet. The Southern Italians will tell you that they are Norman or they're Greek or they're whatever, and they actually speak ancient Greek in this village where I was. And so that kind of spawned this project called Facing Ourselves, for us to really look at ourselves and each other and see our similarities and celebrate our differences. And so I brought the project to Carpinteria, the city very generously, and the Arts Center here, the Linda Fairley Arts Center, welcomed the project, and we did a large-scale exhibition in 2019 here as well. And so Facing Ourselves is kind of a broad look at integration and migration. And so this is sort of the next look at that, and taking it from the human portrait to a portrait of how we live and how what contributions immigrants make into our communities. And so I'm really excited about this expansion of the work. And one of my advisory members, Richard Solomon, is a Santa Barbara lawyer who founded the Immigrant Legal Defense Center several years ago. And so when we brought this project together, I thought I like to fundraise. When I do a show, I almost always pick an entity that I can fundraise for. And so that was just the natural. And so they're really excited about the fact that they're included and they get an opportunity to not only hopefully raise some money, but also raise some awareness around the work that they're doing here in Santa Barbara County.
So interesting. There's so many connections here. It's that's just wonderful that the Immigrant Legal Defense Fund is coming to the table, shall we say, and participating in the show. A question for you, Brett. You decided that you were going to do pairings. So one photograph by Patricia right next to another photograph by you, and it's, you know, Central California versus Western Australia, and set up that way. How did you make the decision to hang one image with another image?
It came about when we decided to do this because my work was already completed. Like I said, I've got about 120 of these lunch bars documented, and Patty was setting out to create hers. And usually, you know, when it's a group show, it's two already produced bodies of work that get melded together, and usually one artist gets one side of the gallery and the other artist gets the other side. And I really didn't want this. I wanted the work to play off each other. So
Yeah.
I didn't make any suggestions to Patty other than the style, and she went out and did her thing and did it so immaculately. And then those images came back to me, and I just thought it would be really, really cool and really fun to pair them. And so I went through and, you know, Patty selected the images that she liked best of hers, and it pretty much aligned with what I thought were her choice images. And so I sat down with those and just played them off my work and just saw which pairs sat together, what commonalities there were, because that's one of the things I wanted to get across in the exhibition, was just that, you know, they're culturally different, but they're essentially the same. And so I was looking for the similarities, just and there's obviously their inherent character, but you know, I played off the colors. There was a couple that were yellow, a lunch bar and a taqueria that were yellow, so we paired those, and there were a blue pair, and a couple of them had telegraph poles, and some of them had ironwork, others had umbrellas. So I just looked for commonalities to pair them together, and it just blew my mind how well it came together, just how beautifully they sit side by side. And we printed them the same size and they're framed the same size, so they're identical, but they've got their own unique little personalities. But again, there's this unity between the work, which I don't know, for me, it was more of an accident, or it's something spiritual or bigger than us, I think, that resulted in that.
I agree with that.
So, Patricia, go ahead. You started to say something.
Oh, I just said I agree with Brett saying that was bigger than us. Kind of something that became, from an architectural sort of flat view, it became much deeper and more of a kind of a spiritual journey, I think, for both of us. And the opportunity, certainly for me, to work with Brett on such a deep level has been an incredible gift.
I have two questions that are very individual for each of you. And Richard, I'm wondering, should we go to quick break? And then here's the questions I want to ask. Brett has been described as a photographer of the new topographic movement, and I want to know more about that. And Patricia has just in this past year done a solo show called Landmass at the Flywheel Festival. And go ahead, Patricia.
Actually, no, the Flywheel Festival did not happen. So that show did not happen.
Okay.
No.
So then I want to move to the show in 2023, which is called Blessings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I want to ask about the solo shows that you've done, you know, all the way back to 2007. So I want to talk about that, and I want to talk about the new topographic movement. And when we get back from the break, let's take one quick break. Richard, we'll be back in 2 seconds. Don't turn that down. I'm talking about the show at the Architectural Foundation Gallery, and it's opening tonight. Quirky, colorful, interesting, respective culinary cultures from Western Australia by Brett, photographer, and taquerias by Patricia in Central California. So these are going to be, I mean, it's fun. They've all got a taco truck coming, and there'll be drinks and fun. So don't turn that down. Back in a minute.
The Channel Islands Park Foundation.
All right, we are clear. By the way, the taco truck is out front of our station right now. So thank you very much.
I have to try and get some food tonight.
Yeah, we have believe it or not, we have a Mexican restaurant right next door to the radio station, Los Altos, which I think loosely translated is like the mountains or the heights, if you will. I've been in there a number of times, and I really do have some pretty darn good food. Woo-hoo. I wish my grandmother were still alive. She could open a restaurant. Oh my God, the tamales she could make.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Woohoo. All right. Why is that still doing that? There we go. Thank you. And then put that marker there. Oh, excuse me. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. Let's see here. Here we go.
Patricia, do you happen to know Santi Fazali?
I've met Santi.
Yeah, I thought you might have because of the images of Italy, etc. And also, his Sicilian background. So John, who's my partner, who was trying to figure out the video for us, he is a photographer as well, and he has been mentored by Santi for about 15 years. And Santi took him when he was awarded a knighthood from the Sicilian government, I think it was.
All right. We are coming back. In 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back. It's Elizabeth Stewart, and we're talking with two photographers, Brett Lee Dix and Patricia Houghton Clark, and their combined work is going to be opening at this Santa Barbara Architectural Foundation tonight, actually, 21st March, and it'll run through a couple of months, so you've got some time to see it. And it is quite an interesting collaboration. So it's the Western Australian lunch boxes, lunch bars, I should say, and Central California taquerias. So I want to talk, first of all, Brett, a personal question about new topographic movement. What is that?
It was a movement that pretty much arose out of an exhibition that was pulled together in the early 70s at George Eastman House over on the East Coast. And there were these photographers that were photographing urban landscapes. So up until that point, landscape photography in the US was very pictorial. It was driven by people like Ansel Adams. And then as a reaction to that, because they were grandiose portraits of the landscapes, and they were highly stylized, and they weren't the landscape as you'd walk into Yosemite to see. So these photographers just started photographing the world around them, the urban landscape, and they did it in a very neutral sort of way. They didn't put much emotion into it. They just let the scenery speak for itself. And when I first got into photography, I got a camera when I was 5 and started photographing and found Ansel Adams' work and fell in love with it. But then that led me into the new topographical work. And that really resonated with me because I spent a lot of time here growing up in Los Angeles with my aunt and uncle, and we went to Yosemite, and it never looked like an Ansel Adams photograph to me. So I really resonated and connected with the new topographical movement. And there was an Australian photographer, Grant Mudford, who was he followed in the footsteps of some of those early photographers like Stephen Shaw and Lewis Boltz and even William Eggleston. And Grant moved here to Los Angeles, and we connected early on, and he's been so supportive to my work over the years and such a huge influence, and I just love his work, and he very much falls into that category. And so that his work had had a hand in my work evolving. So everything I do photographically, I guess, falls into that. I'm interested in landscapes, but landscapes where there's some sort of human footprint, some sort of impact by humanity. I did a series looking at prisons, as I alluded to. I've gone documented, country towns and their decline. The current project, lunch bars certainly falls into that, this fair trade undertaking. And I've been working on a project documenting landscapes that have been impacted by nuclear energy, by atomic energy. So everything from nuclear missile bases through to power stations and nuclear test sites and waste disposal cells, and just these scars on the landscape that won't heal for quite some time. But I do it all in this new topical theme. So it's man's interaction with the landscape, but I try not to make it too stylized and just present the imagery as it sits there before me.
So yeah, I remember with fondness Behind These Walls. When the book was published in 2017, I just thought it was too good to not cover, and it was just a beautiful conversation we had at the time, and it's so interesting because I also made a connection shortly afterwards with a gentleman who was doing prison reform for a certain age group. And I shared the book with him. I don't think I ever told you, but it made a big impression on him.
Oh,
I want
wow.
to, yeah, I know. It's funny connections in life. Patricia, two questions. Blessings. Tell me about that at your studio. And then I want to know, because I see that you have over a period of 4 years done collaborations, two-person collaborations, and that we have meadow photographs. I can't pronounce that word. After the Ash.
Metamorphographs.
Metamorphographs. And likewise, Erasing Lines, Ancestry and Ritual, Observations, those shows that you did with someone else. I want to know what that's like, because now you're doing a show with Brett. Is it any different from doing a solo show? And can you tell me about Blessings?
Well, Blessings, just to start with that, Blessings, I put together an exhibition I have a live workspace in Carpinteria at the Palm Lofts. And I've had a lot of exhibitions and events here, including an artist talk with Brett a few years ago. But yeah, so Blessings was basically celebrating reopening my studio after the pandemic. And I, obviously had shut everything down. And so I thought, what better time to talk about blessings than when we're back at it and healthy again? And so that show was really kind of an overview of my work. And so I had a lot of work from several different projects that I hung, and it was really fun. It was a party, again, to sort of reconnect with the community more than anything.
And can you tell me about what it's like to work collaboratively?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that, Elizabeth, because my very first show was at the Architectural Foundation, and it was a collaboration with the poet who is a friend of mine, Ellen Chavez Kelly. And we worked together for about a year, talking about images that I had shot in Southeast Asia with a plastic camera and using medium format film. I wanted it to be very elemental. And so during my trip, we didn't communicate except by written letters. We didn't communicate by phone or computer. And when I got back, I shared the images with her, and then she ended up choosing 17 that she wanted to write poetry to. And so that is the correspondences show that was in 2007 that we did the book from. And that's actually, coincidentally or not, how I connected with Brett. And because he and his wife, Natalie, came to the show. So yeah, collaborating, I love collaborating. I find every opportunity possible to collaborate. So with a poet, I've collaborated with a very dear friend who's a painter who we did the Metamorphograph series, and I would give him a stack of photographs and he would choose them, the ones that he wanted to respond to. And I find that it expands my work and it expands the experience. Absolutely. I actually prefer to collaborate. I've done quite a few solo shows. The most recent solo show I did was at Silo 118 with Bonnie Rubenstein, and it was a show called Primal Wild. And it was images, again, with the plastic camera that were all shot in the redwoods. And so I'm really happy to have a chance to collaborate again with Brett. It's perfect.
But excuse my ignorance, what's a plastic camera? Are you talking about the little disposable ones?
It's really not disposable, but it's a camera. It's called a Holga that I was introduced to over 20 years ago. And I just kind of took to it. It's about as low tech as you can get. And you literally have to tape it together with black tape so that it doesn't leak too much light in it and to the film. And I love it because you don't have a lot of control, and you don't, in terms of technical control, you have to really understand light and composition in order to shoot with it. And it's always a surprise when you get the film back and you're trying to make sense of it. Sometimes it's just a big mess and sometimes it's fantastic.
Mhm.
So you can create kind of multiple exposure imagery, which I really like to do. It's sort of overlaying, and it's all in camera. It's not a digital process.
How interesting. Now, okay, I realize that you've collaborated with Brett and other artists. You've collaborated with poets. I want to know about your collaboration with filmmakers and musicians too, Patricia.
Well, that is a project that I'm working on now that I've been developing for many years. It's called An American Girl, and it's sort of the theme of it is about my family and looking at ancestry and looking at, again, it's always seems to come back to migration for me, and how all these sort of disparate cultures ended up in the Pacific Northwest, including Russian Jews, Ukrainian Jews, Japanese Americans, English, Irish, just all over the map, and how those peoples who have come into America ended up creating, and I'm using my granddaughter as kind of the focal point, creating this girl who has this incredible heritage. And so I have included composers and filmmakers and set designers, and it's in its sort of fledgling stages right now, but I'm getting ready in May to do a trip up to the Pacific Northwest, because one of the things I found out in this journey is that our great-great-grandfather was a minister who was also an Indian agent in the 1800s, and he and his wife founded an Indian school for the Makah tribe. And I'm going to be taking his autobiography to the tribe so they can have it in their museum in May.
Wow. 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 And document that, I'm sure.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. Your collaboration with musicians. Tell me more.
Well, Randy Tico, who is
Yeah, I've noticed that name. Yeah.
collaborating musician with me on An American Girl, is, as you know, an extraordinary artist. And he and I met, as a matter of fact, at Santa Barbara High School. And
Oh,
we've been friends ever since, and we've collaborated on a few different projects over the years, starting in 1985. I collaborated with him on a project called Soundscapes that was produced at the junior high school. And so I asked him if he could write some music, and he's like, yeah, sure. And a filmmaker from the Oakland area came to Washington with my former daughter-in-law is Japanese American, and her parents were incarcerated during World War II. And Robin, the filmmaker, flew to Seattle to be with us while we interviewed our elderly relatives, and got some extraordinary footage that included finding out that my aunt was in school with Colleen's uncle when he, at 10 years old, in a town in Washington, when he was taken away and incarcerated, and she said goodbye to him behind barbed wire.
Wow. It's funny. Isn't it odd, the connections when they say 6 degrees of separation, it's more likely three, you know. You give a quote from Anthony Bourdain, and I want to finish out our I want to hear both of you what you think of the quote that is given. He once said, the late great Anthony Bourdain said, "Food culture, people, and landscape are absolutely inseparable." And I want to hear a little reflection. Brett, maybe first you reflect on that comment, on that quote.
Yeah, well, I'm like many people. I was a huge, well, I still am a huge Anthony Bourdain fan. What he was doing, um, not just with food, but the cultural side of food was just extraordinary. And it's a shame that he's not here right now, given the socio-political climate, because I'm sure he'd be doing incredible things and have so much to say. Because that's how we express ourselves. We express ourselves in so many different ways, and we do it through music, as you guys were just alluding to, and we do it through food, and our culture is firmly entrenched in everything we do. And there's just these common paths through every culture where you hear musical instruments that are just repeated on different continents, and different foods are repeated on different continents, and it just shows you how intertwined we are, and how much we're the same.
Well, there's a wonderful quote in the press release, that the fast food places, the quick lunch places, the lunch bars and the taquerias are cherished places where one can find more than basic nourishment, the sense of community and service, joyful music, bold decorations, financially accessible meals, broaden our sensibility of not just what it means to feed oneself, but what it means to be, for example, an American or an Australian, or a member of the greater world community. Patricia, can you reflect on the Bourdain quote for me?
Well, I would just really support what Brett said. Brett and I have both traveled extensively, and when you just find that commonality, around family and around people wanting to celebrate together. And one of my most remarkable experiences with food was in the middle of the Sahara Desert, traveling in 1974, and there was a young Bedouin guy traveling with us, and every morning at sunrise he would get up and he would make bread dough, and he would light a fire and he would stick the dough in the sand, bake it, and dust the sand off and eat it. And it was just like, wow, the ways that people feed themselves and the ingenuity is amazing. And so there's the landscape. He made his bread literally in the sand. And so it's extraordinary. And so I love the creativity that people find, and depending on their landscapes,
Mhm.
food all comes from it, obviously.
It's another good quote. The imagery in this show is not only a delicious reflection of respective cultures, but both possess the same dogged self-belief that has allowed these independent small businesses to withstand the corporate fast food onslaught, by melding themselves to meet the need and the location. The show is Fair Trade, 22nd March to 17th May. Thank you both for being here.
You.
All right. Thank you, guys. I'll send you a link to the show and you can use it however you want. And I can't wait to see the show. And thank you very, very much for being with me today.
Thank you for all the support, Elizabeth.
Yeah,
Oh,
thanks for
yeah.
having us.
Thank
And
you.
it's great
Thank
to chat
you.
again.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Right from I managed to find the Harry Potter that we're reading right now on Libby, so on Kindle. I don't know if you guys use